The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, a precisely timed announcement that sliced through the ordinary hum of my day. The subject line, Family Summer Itinerary, was stark, clinical, and utterly devoid of warmth, a chilling preamble to its contents. I didn't even need to open it to grasp its implications. The digital whispers had been building for days, a persistent undercurrent beneath the surface of our usual familial exchanges. Notifications had been pinging relentlessly, images of passports being meticulously stamped, their crisp edges a testament to impending travel. Hushed, conspiratorial phone calls punctuated by hushed excitement about boarding passes and seat assignments. And then, the cascade of excited whispers about destinations, the very names conjuring images of sun-drenched beaches and ancient, whispering ruins. My father, a man who orchestrated life with the flair of a seasoned conductor, a man of grand gestures often paired with startlingly selective affections, was taking the rest of us on a trip. And I, with a calculated, almost surgical precision, was not included. It wasn't the destination itself, though that particular sting was undeniable. A week promised in the Greek islands, a place I'd harbored a quiet, persistent dream of for years. A place imbued with the weight of ancient history and the shimmering allure of turquoise seas. No, the destination was a secondary ache. The primary wound was the casual dismissal, the almost deliberate omission that landed like a lead weight in the pit of my stomach, settling there with a dull thud. My siblings, my older brother, perpetually the golden child, his achievements always lauded with a proud flourish, my younger sister, whose every whim, no matter how fleeting, was seemingly catered to with an effortless grace. They were all going. Their subsequent texts and direct messages, a relentless barrage of emojis depicting planes soaring through azure skies and sunshine so bright it practically vibrated on the screen, felt like tiny, insidious paper cuts. They knew with an intimate certainty that I adored Greece. They knew with the same inherent understanding that I had always profoundly wanted to go. And yet, not a single word. Not a question posed, not a flicker of concern registered that I was being deliberately left behind, relegated to the sidelines of this grand familial adventure. The lesson, as he had vaguely alluded to during a brief, remarkably unconvincing phone call a week prior, was couched in terms of independence and learning to stand on my own 2 feet. He'd framed it with a paternalistic air, a flimsy veneer of concern over my recent, admittedly challenging job search. He spoke of it as an opportunity for me to focus, to dedicate myself without distraction. It was a thin, transparent veil over a much uglier, more insidious truth. I was, in his meticulously crafted family tableau, the least convenient child, the one who didn't always fit neatly into his curated portrait. My life, with its inherent uncertainties and its quiet, often unseen struggles, wasn't as picturesque, as effortlessly successful, as the carefully constructed triumphs of my siblings. And so this lavish trip, this tangible, undeniable proof of his wealth and his deeply ingrained favoritism, became a weapon, a tool designed to underscore my perceived shortcomings, to highlight what he deemed my lack of progress, my perceived failures. I sat at my kitchen table, the lukewarm coffee doing little to combat the creeping chill that had settled deep within me, a frost that seemed to emanate from my very bones. The familiar silence of my apartment, usually a source of comfort, a sanctuary of quietude, now felt vast, echoing, an expanse that amplified my solitude. I didn't rage. No cathartic tears fell. Instead, a strange, almost serene calm descended upon me, a stillness that felt both alien and profound. I watched with a detached curiosity, as the sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. They were insignificant, unnoticed, ephemeral, much like I felt at that moment. Yet, they were undeniably part of the light, catching its brilliance, their transient existence illuminated. The trip spanned 10 days. 10 days of curated Instagram feeds, each photograph a meticulously crafted tableau of impossibly blue water, ancient ruins bathed in the warm, golden light of late afternoon, and my father's beaming face, a picture of paternal pride, flanked by my siblings, all of them looking impossibly happy, impossibly loved, impossibly secure. I watched it all unfold, not with the gnawing pang of envy, but through a detached, almost analytical lens. I perceived the subtle strain behind the forced smiles in some photos, the polite, almost practiced laughter in others. I saw my brother, ever the adept social chameleon, adapting effortlessly to every situation, every expectation. I observed my sister, genuinely thrilled by the sheer luxury of the experience, her youthful exuberance untainted. And I saw my father, basking in the glow of his apparent generosity, a public display of his familial affection, utterly oblivious to the quiet void he had so deliberately carved out in my life. During those 10 days, I did precisely what he had so helpfully suggested. I focused. It wasn't just a superficial focus on my job search, though that remained a priority. I focused on everything. I rediscovered old hobbies that had languished in neglect, devoured books I'd long since set aside, their pages whispering forgotten narratives, and spent long contemplative hours walking through familiar parks, observing the world around me with a newfound sharpness, a heightened awareness. I made plans not for grand, audacious adventures, but for quiet, achievable accomplishments. I organized my finances with a meticulous, almost obsessive care, creating a budget that was not merely practical, but aspirational, a blueprint for a future I was actively building. I reached out to professional contacts, not to solicit favors, but for genuine advice, for the quiet, profound solace of real connection. I began to build a small, solid foundation, brick by invisible brick, in the very place he had implicitly, and so cruelly deemed unstable. The turning point wasn't marked by a dramatic, earth-shattering decision. It was far more subtle, a quiet, almost imperceptible shift in perspective. As I scrolled through their posts, their carefully constructed moments of familial bliss, I stopped feeling as though I was missing out on something essential. I began to see it, with a clarity that surprised me, as an elaborate, meticulously choreographed performance, and I was no longer an unwilling, disheartened audience member. I was the one who had quietly, deliberately, exited the theater, leaving the stage to its players. My father's lesson, intended as a punitive measure, had inadvertently taught me something far more valuable, something that resonated deeply within my core. The true meaning of self-reliance wasn't about enduring solitude, but about understanding and honoring my own intrinsic worth, independent of any external validation, any familial approval. When they returned, their faces etched with the pleasant exhaustion of travel, their luggage laden with souvenirs, the atmosphere in the family group chat was effervescent, buoyant. They recounted tales of sunburns acquired under Mediterranean skies and ancient myths whispered on temple steps, of impossibly delicious food savored and breathtaking vistas that had stolen their breath away. I offered polite congratulations, my words carefully chosen to express my genuine happiness that they had, indeed, enjoyed themselves. My father, perhaps sensing or perhaps simply expecting a subtle undertone of my absence, a lingering shadow of disappointment, asked with a disarming, almost playful lilt, "So how was your lesson, my dear?" I replied, truthfully, my fingers dancing across the keyboard with a quiet confidence. "It was productive, father. I managed to secure a new position." The silence that followed, even through the sterile medium of text, was palpable, a heavy, pregnant pause. My siblings, their messages appearing in rapid succession, chimed in with their congratulations, their words tinged with a surprise that was almost palpable. They hadn't realized, it seemed, that I had been actively pursuing opportunities with such dedicated intent. They had, I suspected, assumed my focus was a passive waiting game, a period of quiet contemplation rather than active endeavor. The real consequence, the one that unfolded with a slow, deliberate grace over the next few weeks, was far more subtle, a quiet recalibration of dynamics. At the first family dinner after their return, the conversation inevitably gravitated towards the trip, its highlights, its unforgettable moments. My siblings, perhaps sensing a subtle but undeniable shift in my demeanor, a newfound equilibrium that was less about seeking their approval and more about possessing it internally, spoke less about the lavish details and more about the historical significance of the places they had visited, their voices carrying a newfound intellectual curiosity. My father, however, seemed incapable of moving on, his gaze persistently circling back to the trip, attempting to elicit some sort of acknowledgement of his benevolence, some overt display of gratitude for the opportunity he had so magnanimously provided. He desperately wanted to hear about how I had missed them, how I had finally grasped the profound, immutable importance of family togetherness, of shared experience. Instead, I spoke about my new job. I detailed its unique challenges, its immense potential for growth, the specific skills I was acquiring, the tangible progress I was making. I talked about my apartment, about the small, thoughtful renovations I was planning, about the deeply satisfying sense of accomplishment that came from building a life that was entirely, unequivocally my own. My voice was calm, steady, devoid of any trace of resentment, any hint of bitterness. I wasn't boasting, nor was I complaining. I was simply stating facts, presenting the reality of my present circumstances with an unvarnished honesty. My father's brow furrowed. his usual easy confidence momentarily unsettled. He had clearly expected a different reaction, a bruised ego that desperately needed stroking, a lingering sense of obligation that would bind me closer to his expectations. He had anticipated me being humbled, perhaps even a little pathetic, grateful for the crumbs of attention he had grudgingly tossed my way. Instead, he saw someone who had taken his attempt at a subtle punishment, his carefully orchestrated exclusion, and transformed it into a quiet, undeniable victory. The lavish trip, intended to highlight my exclusion and my perceived deficiencies, had instead become the unexpected backdrop against which my own quiet competence now shone with a steady, unwavering light. My siblings, too, began to look at me differently. The subtle condescension that had been a part of their interactions, the unconscious assumption of my lesser status, began to fade, replaced by a flicker of genuine curiosity, perhaps even a touch of respect. They heard the unfeigned pride in my voice when I spoke of my work, the quiet confidence that underscored my plans for the future. They saw with a clarity that was undeniable that my lesson hadn't broken me, it had in fact strengthened me. The social consequence wasn't a grand public shaming, a dramatic confrontation, but a quiet, almost imperceptible recalibration of how I was perceived, how I was valued within the intricate tapestry of our family. My father's carefully constructed world, built on the shimmering illusion of effortless success and unwavering affection, now contained a new unexpected element, the undeniable, irrefutable reality of my own quiet resilience. Later that evening, long after the last of the family had departed, I stood on my balcony, a solitary figure beneath the vast expanse of the night sky, looking up at the distant, shimmering stars. The summer air was warm, carrying the delicate, intoxicating scent of distant jasmine, a gentle perfume that settled over the quiet night. There was no triumphant surge of emotion, no exultant laugh escaping my lips, just a deep, profound, and utterly quiet sense of peace. He had sent me away, ostensibly to learn a lesson, and I had, just not the one he had so carefully intended.